Delightful bright weather conditions grace the day, with just 3 days left until Thanksgiving. A sound and smart clinical understudy set out on an experience to investigate a famous and fascinating cavern, considered reasonable for novices, notwithstanding everything apparently going without a hitch, and well, a solitary misstep modified the direction of messing up this go, prompted a misfortune that keeps on energizing hypotheses and fear right up till now, misfortune known as the Nutty clay occurrence. Here at the Workforce of Truth, we will dig profound to answer a basic question: how did a youthful, solid individual named John Edward Jones, who wandered into a cavern visited by thousands every year, always avoid praise the significant Thanksgiving Day with his loved ones? We mean to disperse normal confusions that have flowed inside the internet-based local area and guide you through every one of the subtleties of this story, giving an extensive comprehension of the variables prompting this sad episode. John acquired his most memorable experience investigating caves as a kid when his dad used to take him along anyway. He had not had the potential chance to proceed and improve his cavern creeping abilities from that point forward. On the night of November 24, at 8:00 p.m. a Wednesday, John, alongside his more youthful sibling Josh, set out on an arranged excursion to a cavern. Given their restricted experience, they selected Nutty Clay Cave, a well-known objective for sightseers and cavern voyagers, drawing in a huge number of guests every year. Having said their farewells to John's little girl and his pregnant spouse, Emily, the team of John and Josh advanced toward the entry of Nutty Clay Cavern in Utah District. They were in good company. 9 extra companions and colleagues had gone along with them, fulfilling the buckling guideline that requested at least 2 individuals on location. Strangely, not a single one of them had investigated this cavern prior to depending entirely on a guide and the tales shared by others. Prior to digging into their underground experience, a couple of significant things should be referenced. Nutty Clay Cave has just a single entry, estimating just 1:8 a.m. across. Importance: you can't cross a cavern section and exit from an alternate point. In caves like this one, pilgrims explore through entries until they arrive at a room known as an initial, where they can either go around or proceed to the following opening. For this reason, it is critical to follow a way that has been investigated before to guarantee there is sufficient room ahead to pivot and not end up looking for an exit. For sure, Nutty Clay Cave is a wonderful sinkhole with various vacationer well-disposed detects that are delighted in by numerous. Some of these spots are known as the enormous room, the labyrinth, and the huge slide, which dives at a lofty 45°. point. Yet the room is enormous enough for route and investigation. Most cavers visit these regions of the cavern and frequently stop just after the large slant as the genuine test starts. Past in this segment, a room branches into 2 ways, left and right. The correct way, very much investigated and planned, is known as Sway's Push or Birth Trench, that voyagers really need to suck their stomachs in. To overcome it includes a very small passage, generally straight around 50 long. There have been numerous occurrences of individuals getting caught in the birth trench before yet fruitful salvages have been done. This channel exits into an opening wide to the point of resting and choosing whether to backtrack or go on through an even smaller section called the aorta slither. This piece of the cavern is seldom utilized because of the very tight entry and long passage, requiring additional experience in light of the remarks from individuals present during that appalling day, including companions and heroes. JN and the group chose to be partitioned into gatherings of 2 and investigate various pieces of the cavern. John decided to be in a group with his sibling Josh and headed towards the Weaves Push region. John, with his certain character, chose to leave, and Josh followed him anyway. The primary inconsistency in this story emerges once they go through the large slide room. It is accepted that John planned to go through the birth waterway and coincidentally entered some unacceptable way, thinking he was in the birth channel, or through his slithering the choice to take a left-hand turn into a less investigated region called Ed's Push, prompted an unforeseen consummation. Ed's Push entry was never legitimate because of its intricacy. Ordinarily, new sections are planned and investigated for spelunkers to work with. Route the standard is straightforward on the off chance that a region isn't very much planned. It implies it's not expected for cavers to investigate. Specialists even considered setting shutting signs in certain region, like Ed's Push, yet later this thought was declined, making sense of. This is a wild cavern, so it will destroy that experience by and by. John followed this way, which is around 30 after long exciting ride trip, with many turns and contours that are difficult to explore. It takes an exceptional procedure to move through a confined limestone burrows that injury through the earth, like the way of a worm, first with arms, then bears, lastly legs. It's not as brown nose as pushing forward like in the birth channel. Ultimately, John arrived at one of the most risky pieces of Ed's Push, called the Wine Tool. This region is notable due to a past episode back in 2004, including 16-year-old Brock Clark. He was a lot more modest in size than JN, being just 5'7" in tall and weighing 140 lb, while John was 6't tall and 200 lb. Clark got wedged when he attempted to pivot in the Wine Tool through entry, and it required 14 hours for the salvage group to save him. In the wake of bowing in a L-molded position, John figured out how to pass the Wine Tool pressure, thinking he had achieved something that most couldn't. Anyway, he knew nothing about the difficulties ahead as the section extended a little and fixed driving towards a edge. John realized he wouldn't have the option to turn. As of now, he expected to discover some opening ahead to make a turnaround. Moving toward the edge, he needed to breathe out all air from his lungs and just barely get through. Sadly, after such a tight region, there was no opening, and the 45 slant began pulling John with gravity downwards. John attempted to stop with his hands. However, he was, at that point, drained and depleted, so he chose to push a smidgen more forward until he could rest on it something and ponder what to do next. Once he balanced out, he motioned toward Josh not to follow him, as the slant would just muddle what is happening. Looking for Josh's recommendation on what to do next, they presumed that the most ideal choice was to continue onward and track down a sufficiently wide region to pivot. Previously exhausted John began creeping forward and saw some kind of opening that gave him trust. The opening before him closely resembled the opening toward the finish of the birth waterway, where in the wake of going through you find a huge room. He could have believed that this is a comparative region to the past Wine Tool section, where you need to twist into a L shape and pass through. Once he began getting inside the opening ahead, he understood that it was absolutely impossible that forward, yet his middle was at that point inside. Far more terrible. The curve had gotten him practically like a snare, holding him set up beneath his rib. Confine, he started propelling himself upwards from this fissure, yet his arms were in a futile position. One was stuck under him, the other constrained in reverse by an offshoot of rock. Understanding that every one of his endeavors just exacerbated it as escaping the 10 to 18 in fissure, which is more modest than certain microwaves, is almost unimaginable without outside help. Once John loosened up his muscles, his body moved towards the tightest side of this opening, which was just 8 in wide, making it difficult for John to inhale. Also pushing up, John began overreacting and calling Josh for help. Josh crept towards John with his legs ahead to try not to get caught, yet it required some investment for Josh to go through every one of the hindrances John went through at long last. Josh arrived at John, and what he saw panicked him. However, he attempted to quiet John down without giving indications of dread. Seeing his feet and perceiving how gulped he was by the stone, that is the point at which I realized it was significant. Josh said he wrapped John's calves with his feet and attempted to hold John out, yet with no accomplishment. After nearly 60 minutes of battle, they were depleted and chosen to call for proficient assistance. After a fast petitioning God together, Josh vowed to return quickly, while Josh was away. Some other relatives and companions came to John's area, as close as conceivable, to converse with him over the long haul. Gravity began pushing John much more profound into the obscure. He began feeling the primary indications of trouble breathing because of stomach pressure brought about by organs pushing on it. Consistently played against Joan's life, the principal hero, to abandon her things and drive to the cavern. Immediately was Susie Marta. It required close to 3 hours until Josh went for help, and Susie showed up right down to John. Susie knew about that segment of the cavern and the interesting wine tool entry, so she attached a rope to her lower leg as a safeguard, likewise being just 5'3". Untold assisted her with exploring through the passages quicker than Josh. It was around 12:30 toward the beginning of the day. Once she arrived at John, his answer was shockingly quiet, as he trusted that an expert hero would assist him with getting liberated from this trap. John had retrograde amnesia when initially reached by Susie, supporting that he might have fallen through and hit his head. She tied the rope around John's feet and given pulling him a shot from the fissure, yet with no accomplishment because of the intricacy of the section. The entire way to Joan's area, the rope experienced an excess of rubbing influencing its viability. Susie attempted different forceful procedures. However, Joan's body moved a couple inches just to be pushed back again. Once Susie delivered the rope, she realized that it required a further developed strategy, a pulley framework that was utilized before in 2004 to protect Brock. In the meantime, a major group of 20 heroes showed up at the cavern area to conceptualize on what to do next. Many variables impacted their salvage plan, like the distance to John from the entry being around 400 ft. It required over 1 hour for each hero in turn to arrive at John. They likewise needed to consider the wine tool region, restricting their capacity to bring enormous apparatuses through the entry. Furthermore, the stone in this cavern is truly hard, so it required a ton of work to introduce each snare for the pulley framework. While heroes arranged the pulley framework, other colleagues conversed with John to quiet him down. John was a dedicated Christian, so supplicating was vital for him, particularly in this outrageous circumstance where the line between life, furthermore, demise was blurring as time passes. It had been the entire night now for John to be topsy-turvy, and his body began giving indications of actual limits to endure such a position. The human body is planned the opposite way around, and remaining topsy-turvy for an extensive stretch is generally risky for our heart, lungs, and cerebrum. All organs begin pushing on the lungs, restricting their capacity to grow to their full limit, making oxygen hunger in the body. A lot of blood begins collecting in the mind, and our body is intended to pull blood from the legs, all things considered, and convey it in legitimate sums around the body. Once a lot of blood and poisons begin gathering in the chest area, especially in the cerebrum, our heart begins siphoning an excess of volume of blood, ultimately beginning to fall flat, causing pulse irregular characteristics, prompting organ disappointment. In the end, John began daydreaming and losing his momentary memory. It was difficult to observe. All heroes were depleted and exchanged with one another to save more energy. Some of them got caught in the wine tool region for quite a while, creating a setback. However, there was significantly less concern for them, as they were attached with a rope. Sadly, John didn't have that extravagance. He was unable to try and inhale appropriately because of pressure in a very restricted space. They chose to carry out wired telecom framework to JN to allow him to converse with his significant other. She let him know, "John, you are pushing too hard. Have a few rest, and afterward put in again much more effort." He answered to her, guaranteeing that he would be out soon, so they didn't need to stress. At last, at 4:00 evening, on that day, the pulley framework was prepared in the pit. 8 individuals filled in, as one of the heroes named Ryan Shees was close to John, so to make the draw successful, he needed to push his legs over. Once they began pulling, John began shouting because of horrifying torment in his legs. His legs were totally blue with no heartbeat, showing that insufficient blood circled in his legs, causing nerve harm. Heroes needed to shut down like clockwork to allow John to rest a piece. Inch by inch, they were hauling John out of the cleft, and it was by all accounts working. They had the option to pull him to the degree that Ryan saw John's eyes. His eyes were red and tired. Ryan passed a water to John and kept pulling. Endeavors, it seemed to be a supernatural occurrence, pulling John from a 10-in fissure. It worked until unforeseen happened. The level of the entry was just 12 in, making John's feet hit the roof. Now 19 hours in a topsy-turvy position with legs totally numb, John couldn't twist them. To make pulling more powerful, heroes began thinking about breaking John's legs. However, specialists on location cautioned them that it could cause shock and a heart failure. Ryan began bowing John's legs, and unexpectedly a boisterous impact happened. Ryan dropped briefly, and subsequent to opening his eyes, he saw blood surrounding. He got harmed to his face by one of the bombed pulley and carabiners that emerged from the cavern and hit his face. Because of this injury, he needed to get out and look for clinical consideration. The most obviously terrible thing is that John wedged himself significantly more profound by slicing blood flow to his arms, and his legs were totally dead. John proved unable to assist with liberating himself even an inch. Once Ryan was out of the pit and shipped off the clinic, his dad Dave had his spot. This time he attempted to tie a rope around John's body, yet couldn't go it through the wedged middle. While restoring the pulley again, Dave got caught for 15 minutes, after which he understood that there was absolutely no chance of pulling a 200 lb man without him pushing and attempting to use here and there. Dave comprehended that it would ultimately jeopardize the two of them. Dave propelled himself out of the 12-in burrow and asked Brandon Koalis to have his spot. Brandon brought the telecom framework again to allow John to address his better half, Emily. He heard a ton of confidence, as would be natural for them, yet he comprehended that everything looked irredeemable. Brandon detailed that John, prior to becoming lethargic, made some sputtering breaths which might show suffocation. The salvage group accumulated in the pit region to examine further advances and chose to send one of the paramedics to John to decide whether he was as yet alive at 11:56 p.m. On Wednesday, November 25, the John Jones was articulated dead. The salvage group worked over 24 hours in a row to give pulling John a shot of his rough jail. John endured a remarkable 27 hours, which is very nearly multiple times beyond what was anticipated the human body can endure. Around 10 hours at a 90 topsy-turvy position. Yet John's position was at 70, giving him more hours to live. Out of 20 heroes, 6 of them slithered straightforwardly to John by gambling, being caught in an unmapped part of the Nutty clay cave. Subsequent to dying, John's body turned out to be rapidly firm, making it difficult to recuperate. John was passed on to rest in the Ed's Push part of the Nutty clay cave forever, which in the end turned into his grave. That, as well as authorities put 2 seals on the cavern. First, they fixed Ed's Push entrance, forestalling prompt admittance to John's body, and later the whole cavern framework was stopped with concrete, at absolutely no point ever to be investigated. In the future, a plaque was put there to recognize John Edward Jones.